you everyone for being here. We are Lodestar Finance and we're happy to host you on this second AMA. This time we're having our friends from PlutusDAO just over to discuss with us their protocol, what are they aiming for, their assets, and how we can incorporate these assets to our money market, which is Lodestar Finance, um, aiming at being Arbitrum's native money market, and especially with this collateral, with the yield-bearing assets from Arbitrum as collateral. So let's go around the table, introduce each other. So Kanta, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Sorry. I'm Quanta. So I'm one of the founders of Lodestar Finance. I got my start in crypto a little bit before DeFi summer started in 2020. DeFi is kind of what kind of got me really into crypto. I mean, I had messed around with like Bitcoin like way back in the day when it wasn't really worth anything, but I never really got into crypto until DeFi. Started working on this project probably about 6 months ago now with Coops and Apo, and we really got introduced to the Arbitrum space around the beginning of the year through Treasure DAO, and I was just really blown away with how the Arbitrum ecosystem has kind of developed. Like all the protocols here are really good about working together and creating like an interoperable network where all the products from the various ecosystems sort of like add value to each other. So, I mean, it was really just the ideal place to try to build our own project, and that's where we are today. We're pretty close to our launch, and we're excited to share with you guys what we've been working on for sure. I'll pass it over to Coops.
Yeah, thanks, Quana. Like Quana, I've been in the crypto space for quite a while. If y'all caught our last AMA, I mentioned I've experienced back mining Ethereum when it was just coming out. So seen a lot of ups and downs in crypto, but this is my first DeFi project I've ever been a part of. And yeah, like Quana said, very excited to deliver some value to you guys and also to dive in further with some Plutus integrations that we have planned. Yep.
Sounds good. BK, please feel free to introduce yourself and explain to us what Plutus DAO is and what's the aim of the protocol.
Yeah, I'm Big K. To start out, I mean, I guess I started in crypto, like first just kind of reading about it on forums like Bitcoin early on, like 2011, 2012. But I was pretty young then, so like I wasn't investing or anything. Then Ethereum I started investing in like 2016, 2017 time frame. I mined it a little bit too. I played on Dogecoin a little bit, like when it early came out, and like mined that for fun. And then like most recently, like 2020, 2021, I kind of especially with the lockdowns, kind of dove into crypto more eventually, and I had some familiarity with Convex and Curve. And when I heard about VDPX, I kind of had this idea of like, kind of take that Convex layer, bring it to Arbitrum, and loop Dopex into it along with other projects that have VE tokenomics. And so that's kind of where the idea for Plutus came from early on. I linked up with EtherSoul, and we kind of started building a team. Ultimately launched with these wrapped assets, wrapped VDPX and wrapped V Jones. Early on, it was actually just like the regular tokens because it was before like VDPX was out. But so yeah, we started with those PLS assets, and then as time went on, we've kind of expanded into now having a plvGLP, and that's kind of like the quick story on the backstory of Plutus and how we got to where we are today.
Sounds super fascinating. So you guys would see yourself as the latest layer on the curve war?
Yeah, so we kind of saw like that was kind of our bullish thesis for Dopex, is that similar to how Curve had this thing for like a DEX with the gauge emissions. We're bullish just on, I guess, on-chain derivatives too, and Dopex is kind of, this options protocol that will have these gauge emissions going to it, which, we think will be valuable. And so, just, DOPEX, all these, DOPEX kind of goes hand in hand with the curve wars in the sense that like people will be competing for these emissions. And that's kind of what we target for these PLS assets, things that will have people competing for a project's emissions.
So could we say the end game would be when bribe?
Exactly, yeah. Because basically with bribes, it's like people like to have like a tangible number they can look at and say like, okay, this many emissions are going to come out. One token controls this many emissions. So okay, one token is worth this much money, and then people say, okay, so I'll bribe this much, so that way I can get those emissions. So that's ultimately the long-term goal, is that the PLS token, generates these bribes from all of these different projects whose V tokens we acquire that have these gauge emissions. So, right now, the one that'll be the earliest will be VSPA. Their Demeter gauge will be coming out soon. And so that'll have gauge emissions with it, where people can basically go and direct emissions to the different LPs on their Demeter product, which then we'll have a bribe market get set up for it. So, users, we have our V2 tokenomics coming. Users will be able to lock their PLS and then either control those emissions themselves or, sell them off to be bribed. So that's kind of, the general flow is, get the PLS asset, then a bribe market gets set up for it, and then the users kind of get to get the full benefit of their PLS tokens.
Oh, this makes it sound like the DeFi season in Arbitrum has just started. And
that's it. A lot of things like are just now being built on Arbitrum, and the momentum's there, and it hasn't really slowed down. Like more and more projects keep popping up.
Sounds good. You've told us about DOPEX. You've told us about Spirax. I came to Plutus as soon as I heard about that integration of the Spirax assets to Plutus, and that's when I started digging into Plutus. Any other projects you guys are supporting? If you can have a little overview, and then we'll go deeper into it.
Yeah. So we have DOPEX, Spirax. We also have Jones, and Jones is like a further layer built on top of DOPEX that a lot of people, options are complicated for them, or they don't have the time to either learn options or manage them. So Jones is kind of this layer that comes in and does that managing for users, as well as they're developing some other like useful vault products that also simplify the whole process for users. So that they'll also be having an emissions gauge too when they release their V Jones. And so that's kind of the next, or well, the third project we have is a PLS asset right now. And yeah, those are the big three: DOPEX, Jones, and Spirax.
Cool. Thanks, BK. I'll ask a few questions to Coops and Konta. Konta, would you like to introduce us to Lodestar quickly, and how the mechanics of the protocols work?
Sure. So Lodestar is sort of rolling out in two phases here. So in a couple weeks, we'll be launching our V0 protocol, which at its core is just a compound fork. We haven't changed any of the major infrastructure. A lot of the stuff that we've done is change interest rates models, as well as find some novel ways to include assets like plvGLP, which on their own don't have a price oracle. So there's not too much craziness going on in V0, but the magic really comes in V1, where we will allow users to collateralize these liquid staked assets. If you look at, Plutus's catalog of products, they really are our ideal partner in this venture, because they've already created a lot of these. plvGLP, the Plutus DOPEX, and of course we definitely have our eyes set on offering the PLS SPA and Jones as well. It's just a matter of figuring out the pricing oracle. So we look forward to continue to expand that asset reach. We really see a future where Lodestar is the Arbitrum maximalist money market, where you will choose to collateralize your liquid staked assets with Lodestar and take loans against them, because as long as your loan interest rate doesn't outpace the interest rate you're getting from the liquid staked assets, like it's going to be it's very capital efficient. Plus, you'll in the long run be able to pay down your loan sort of passively. So there's a lot of value that could be had, and Arbitrum makes it especially valuable because of the way these products sort of integrate together.
Definitely sounds pretty interesting in the future of DeFi's, of Arbitrum's DeFi, especially when it comes to freeing the liquidity. So much liquidity is just locked without being able to be invested while generating yield. And one of the biggest assets on Arbitrum has been GLP. And GLP has been a game changer because it works as an index first, as it's 50% stable Bitcoin and Ethereum, but also it powers the machine that GMX is. But on the other hand, our friends from Plutus, they came out with a wrapper called plvGLP, which is Plutus Vault GLP. And BK, could you tell us what's the story behind PLV? What was the vision? And yeah, introduce us to this asset that I believe is a game changer in the DeFi horizon.
Yeah, so plvGLP basically came about. We were talking just to the GMX team about like what could be built there, just on top of GMX in general. And we kind of learned some things about GLP just in terms of like how users interacted with it, where GLP has this reward token called ESGMX attached to it, which is escrow GMX, which basically they found a lot of users just kind of didn't know what to do with, or it didn't amount to a lot for them. So they just kind of like left them there and didn't do anything with them. So then we were also wondering like, why aren't other projects building things like, being able to take loans on top of it and other just like tools on top of it? And basically a lot of projects too were just like, there's the ESGMX component, and like since it's locked for a year essentially, like we don't know how to handle it between that and the users. So we were like, okay, so we kind of liked the GMX token and the idea of accumulating some of it, and we knew that users and projects didn't really like having these rewards that they couldn't instantly do something with. So we kind of came up with the idea for doing this GLP wrapper where we would withhold the ESGMX rewards, but we would add PLS incentives on top, and they would be liquid. So users could effectively have this GLP product that they can instantly get all their rewards in a liquid manner, and we benefit too because we get to keep the ESGMX, which we wanted. So there's like a fair trade going on there, and it solves that issue for other projects of they no longer have to deal with the ESGMX side of things. And we also added in an auto compounder because a lot of users, that's kind of all they want to do is just have their they take their GLP rewards and they buy more GLP with it, stake them, and just continue that process. So actually having to do that friction was taken out, and it's done multiple times a day, so it's probably more frequently than they were doing it. So they benefit there too. And so now you kind of have this product that it's constantly increasing in value because it's constantly being auto compounded, and users get all the rewards immediately, and they're liquid, so they can do what they want with them. So that was kind of the full picture around plvGLP.
And what would be the fee structure on this product? And is it redistributed to the stakers, or does it go to the DAO?
Yeah, so the fee on it. So basically, you can look at like I guess technically the ESGMX rewards that are being taken as a fee itself. So again, at any time, whatever the ESGMX rewards are, we're taking those, and then the fee on it is. So whenever you exit, there's basically a 2% exit fee that those go into the get held by the DAO treasury. The GLP itself gets staked. And so when a user exits, they take a 2% fee there. And then just on the ETH yield itself, we go and take a 10% fee on the ETH yield. But all that ends up getting made up for by the PLS rewards on top of it. And somewhere on our PlutusDAO Twitter, one of the recent tweets has an APR breakdown, different yields on each of our products. So you can see what the yield is on GLP versus the yield on plvGLP.
Sweet. I will share that tweet under the actual Twitter space so people can have a look at it. I also shared.
Yep, I'll find that for you.
Thank you very much. I also just shared an article written by our team on how plvGLP is what we call a prime collateral. And I would love to have Quanta speak about it. What are the different use cases of plvGLP? How you can leverage up, how you can leverage down, and the different methods.
Yeah, and first I echo everything Big K said. I mean, he's exactly right. I think we actually talked about this as a team ourselves of how we could offer GLP in the market, and it was just so complicated that we initially just said, maybe we can do this down the road, but for now it's just too complicated for us to work with. But once we saw plvGLP and looked into it a little bit, it was just like the way the Plutus team did it. They really made it super easy for us to integrate into our app, and we thank you guys for that. As far as how plvGLP can create value within the Lodestar protocol, it's actually quite spectacular how powerful it can be. So there's really, the way I see it, there's three major strategies that you could employ using plvGLP in the Lodestar app. The first one would be for a more bullish position. You could be leveraged long into PLV. So sort of what this looks like in practice is you start off with some plvGLP and you use that as collateral in the Lodestar money market. You would borrow stable coins against it to a leverage level that you were comfortable with, and then you take those stable coins and you can purchase more plvGLP. And then because you have more plvGLP, you can borrow more. And so you can sort of start to loop this where you're continuing to borrow more stable coins, convert them to plvGLP, stake them, and then borrow more stable coins. And there's a few factors that ultimately affect what your APR is going to be doing something like this. The main drivers, of course, are what is GLP actually paying out this week, because that changes on a weekly basis depending on the GMX rewards, as well as what is the current rate to borrow stablecoins. So we're going to offer basically every stablecoin on our platform that can be deposited into GMX. So that is USDC, USDT, Frax, DAI, and there might be one other that I'm forgetting. But so anyway, as long as you can borrow any one of those for a relatively cheap rate. And finally, the third driver is how much leverage you use. And this is sort of course, it depends on the comfort level of the user. But as you sort of trend towards the riskier side of things, you can definitely hit APRs denominated in GLP as high as like 100%. So that's quite amazing, really, to be able to earn 100% return on an indexed asset made up of stable coins, Bitcoin and Ethereum. So that's probably the way that I'm personally going to use it. But there's also some other strategies as well that involve more hedge positions. So another way you could sort of do the same exact thing, but in a hedged way, would be rather than borrowing stable coins against your plvGLP, you could borrow Bitcoin or Ethereum or some other volatile asset. And that sort of will mute the volatility in the position a little bit more, because you'll be net short whatever asset you used to buy into GLP with. So like if you use Ethereum as the example, if you were to borrow Ethereum and then buy GLP with it, if GLP sort of goes sideways or goes down, that position will actually make you more money than if it goes up. So in a way, it allows you to buy GLP in sort of a bearish position and still take advantage of the massive returns paid out in GLP as while you're holding the plvGLP collateral. And finally, there's one other way that the article doesn't really discuss that sort of came to me later after I had already published that article. And this is sort of just like a somewhat delta neutral position. You can't get it quite perfect because we do not offer Uniswap or Chainlink, which are two GMX assets. And also it's quite difficult to really match it perfectly because like the GLP composition is always in flux. Like on any given day, like the relative weights of each coin are different. But what you could do and get it roughly close would be to do the same looping position, but you try to sort of match the weight of stablecoins, Bitcoin, and Ethereum that you're borrowing as you loop into this position. And if you buy into GLP with roughly the same assets that GLP is made up, then you are somewhat neutral to the price of GLP. So essentially, as long as there's not crazy trading action where coins are removed from the underlying GLP pool, it's going to be a fairly neutral position where you'll just take advantage of the higher interest rate paid out in fees from GLP than you're paying from the Lodestar DApp, and you're sort of just arbitraging that rate and making a profit without any exposure to the underlying assets. So that was a lot of information. I know, Waffle did say he was going to post a link to that article. I would encourage people who are curious to read it. And yeah, that's some of the more interesting ways that plvGLP can be used in our app.
For a DGen user who would like to leverage up, these offer some really advantageous APRs, and like you said, you can always hedge against a price dump of GLP. Something that is also interesting from protocol point of view, or even now as a bear market, is that this will also create a huge demand in stables, and this demand of stables, I believe, will create some pretty high APRs for deposits. So yeah, pretty interesting and excited for the release of this. Quanta, could you tell us a bit more about other supported PLS assets? I know PLS Depix is going to be great. Could you tell us a little bit more on these other supported assets in the protocol?
Yeah. So like we were saying before, our V1 protocol, which will start, getting the development focus shortly after our launch here, is where we will really start to focus on these liquid staked assets. Because of how good of a job Plutus did making plvGLP easy to work with, we were able to get that into V0 no problem. But as we look ahead to V1, there's definitely a few assets that really stick out to us as things we want to add. So obviously PLS DPX is probably the most, it's probably the first one that comes to mind. Dopex is also a huge player in Arbitrum. The Lodestar team is actually also trying to work on a partnership with those guys. And so DPX definitely one of the top contenders. We really would also like to see SPA get a Chainlink support, because we really see how Arbitrum is definitely lacking its own native stablecoin right now, and Sparex is really well positioned for that to be them in the long run. So that's another asset that we definitely have our eyes on. But same with the Dopex USDC coin, that's another one. But anyway, long story short is all these liquid staked assets that Plutus is working on. And then I'll give a quick shout out to the DR Magic token, the MDD Magic Dragon DAO token for our Treasure DAO friends. These types of assets, these are the types of assets we're going to have in V1. And really the value prop here is going to be quite similar to how it works for plvGLP right? A lot of these same strategies will exist. Just to take a quick example, right? If you were using PLS DPX as collateral, you could borrow stable coins against that and then buy more PLS DPX, and you could leverage up your APR that way. Alternatively, you could take a more hedged position and you could borrow regular DOPEX against your PLS DPX and then just stake that. So at the end of the day, like, you're capturing that staking reward, but you're not, you have no price exposure because you're borrowing the asset that you have to repay. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities. And for degens who really want to leverage up or hedge their positions, like, Lodestar is going to be the app for you for sure.
To jump on what you said about borrowing DPX to stake it again as PLS DPX, and this, I believe, could help with the peg sometimes. Some people complain about the peg of the PLS, DPX, and DPX being offset. Others look at it as opportunities, as myself. For me, I'm always very happy buying some DPX and going through taking advantage of the arbitrage opportunity. BK, how do you feel that Lodestar could impact the ecosystem? Actually, we would love your input. We would love to hear your expertise on that. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I think that where Lodestar comes into helping the ecosystem is really the growth of it, in that right now there's very little that can be done with a PLS asset or PLV asset other than stake it. And when you give users more things they can do with an asset, it opens the user base to more people. So just by effect of that, by a lending product coming along, that'll open up the product interest to more people, which can ultimately then grow the Plutus ecosystem in turn, because people will come and say, oh, well, I'm going to go and either, as you said, in helping the peg, they might come and say, okay, I want PLS asset so I can take loans against it. They'll see that there's an indifference in the exit pool where it's like, oh, I can get it at a discount. So they'll come in and purchase it at that discount, which, brings it up. Or, users will come in and they will mint more PLS assets or PLV assets, which then increases the amount, of TVL within the protocol, the amount of governance power that the project has. And then there's also, I think lending is one of the base level infrastructure for a new token in terms of what can then be built off of it. So it was kind of mentioned before, these different strategies between delta hedging, leveraging long, leveraging short, taking advantage of the different aspects of GLP and lending against it. But it also creates this opportunity where then other projects even can come along and they can make their own sort of structured products on top of these lending products too. So they can take the PLS token and then make a strategy with it that involves maybe lending against it. Even if it's just managing a simple position for users. There are a lot of users who don't want to manage positions. So, there's this opportunity for other projects to then further build on top and just, kind of do things like you said, auto make a leverage long position for them, through the token, or a delta neutral position, or whatever it is that the user's looking for. And, that again further opens the product up to more users, more possibilities, which can, further grow the ecosystem. So, Lodestar is kind of this, and just the lending aspect in general, kind of one of these first pieces of infrastructure that are needed to build out a project even further and allow, more and more things to be built off of them. A lot of DeFi summer and the original yield farming era, I feel like a lot of it was based around being able to get lending against a certain token and then being able to further farm with that token. And plvGLP is kind of prime for that because it already auto compounds and effectively auto farms itself. So that's kind of where I see it growing the ecosystem, just in that it's the first piece of infrastructure that's needed for even more infrastructure to be built around it.
Definitely, for sure. And Also, something is pretty magic into the Arbitrum is the cooperation between the protocols. DeFi was for too long some kind of PvP, and then DeFi 2.0 showed that collaboration could maybe exist at the protocol level. And my feeling is that we reached to a point where that collaboration, that PvE, has arrived to a point where it's protocol with other protocols. It's not within the protocol itself. And the money market into all this also creates a future demand for these blue chip assets, because when you borrow, when you take leverage on an asset, it kind of locks a future demand, if you see what I mean. Quanta, anything you would like to add into this talk?
Yeah, so I touched on, we have an unreleased article that'll talk a little bit about possible collaborations with the DopeX community, where I used that language. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, right, when you have debt denominated in a certain asset, there's future demand for that debt. I mean, you can sort of see this on a sort of a global macro scale with the U.S. dollar right now. The entire world has dollar-denominated debt, which is making the dollar versus their local currency very strong. All this debt is creating future demand for those dollars, and this can be done in DeFi as well. And in fact, it's how a lot of coins have scaled up, by denominating debt in the coins. So yeah, there's definitely possibilities there. I think specifically in the DopeX article, I discuss how this strategy can be used to create future demand for the DPX USD token. But that's definitely for another AMA. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on, Big K. We're really looking forward to furthering this relationship with Lodestar and Plutus. I really think our protocols are a match made in heaven. I think really a lot of the V1 Lodestar features that we have in store, couldn't really be possible without sort of the products that you guys have already built. And I know you've sort of touched on that a little bit already, how as each of these money Legos gets introduced to the system, how it sort of expands the possibilities and the user base who may be interested in those possibilities. And so thanks for what you guys did, and we're really excited to work with you guys.
Yeah, and thank you guys for having me on here to talk about Plutus, kind of spread the word on lending against PLV assets. Like you said, I think this is just the beginning of this relationship. There's a lot more that can be built off of it, a lot more synergies between both of our projects that I think we'll both take advantage of.
Thanks a lot for coming, BK. Thank you everyone for attending the CMA, and see you around on our Discord.
Sounds good. All right, guys, have a good one.
Thanks, guys. You too.